Hello, good morning. This is Edna Keep. Welcome. We're live here today, and I'm going to be answering any questions you have. I'm going to chat a little bit ahead of time about some of the things that's been going on for us while you guys get some questions ready for me. But I wanted to say, you know what, we had our mastermind this last weekend, and we have got an absolute stellar group to be working with right now. There's so much knowledge in that room. My head was spinning at the end of the weekend. Some of the favorite parts that we heard from the group, because I always ask at the end of the day, what was your favorite or your best takeaway for the weekend? We got really great feedback on our vendor take back role play, because people don't get a chance to ask for vendor takebacks every day. So we set it up so that they could practice, and we even had one of the masterminders' sons there, and he's 14 and he's quite excited about learning about real estate investing. And he's traveled a bit with his dad, and they've listened to a lot of Rich Dad audios, and so he's learning quite a lot, and he just loves it. And he said, you know what, my favorite part was the vendor take back exercise. I didn't even know there was such a thing. And I wish I was old enough that I could ask for one already. So it was pretty cool. It's vendor take back is the money you ask for from the seller. And having the chance to practice that, it was quite interesting how many different ways that a deal ended up getting structured by what the questions that were asked, what they found out about the vendor. And of course, each vendor got to make up their own story. So, because that's what it's like in real life. You can't go in knowing what their story is. So the point was to ask lots of good questions so that you could see where or why a vendor take back would fit for them. So that was one thing that happened on the weekend that people were pretty excited about. Another thing that we did on Sunday was we did a hot seat for one of the couples in the mastermind session, and they said that was the most powerful part of the weekend too, because we spent about an hour, just over an hour, working, the whole group of us working on their business plan. So there were a lot of good ideas thrown around, and they came away feeling pretty good about their business plan and with some good action steps on what they could work towards next. So that's really, really good. So welcome everyone. I see I got some people joining. This is awesome. I don't know if I have any questions on here, but I do have, hi Chris, hi Logan, hi John, hi Andrew. We missed you at the mastermind this weekend, Andrew. It was really, really good. And another thing that happened this weekend, which was so powerful, is one of our members who's been with us for a couple years, actually the mother-daughter team, who are realtors and fellow real estate investors, talked about something that happened to them just recently that they were totally unaware of, that it was even possible. And basically their story was, you know what? We're always learning in this industry. Things that you've never even heard of come up. And what it was they had arranged some vendor or some actually private money financing. And the private money financer put second mortgages on every single property they owned instead of the few properties that they were using for the collateral. So until they went to do some refinancing, they hadn't even realized that had happened. So you have to be careful when you're dealing with stuff like that to not give away every bit of collateral that you'd ever have, because then it happens that the lenders, you can't access some of your money that you thought you might have been able to access. So I've got a few questions that I noticed have come up here, and Chandelle is helping me out here, and she types them on my screen because I don't want to wear my glasses. I'm a little vain that way. And so she types them up and puts them on slide deck for me, so this is perfect. And for any of you that are actually on the live call that were in the mastermind, it'd be awesome if you'd point out some of your favorite parts, because Chandel's going to type that in for me too as well. One of the things that I think that people should be aware of is some of the new mortgage rules that are coming out. We deal primarily with apartment buildings, so it affects things a little bit differently than single family homes. But one of the things that we're noticing is that the buildings are not being valued where they should be. And some of it's because our vacancy rate's higher. Some of it's because of what's going on in Vancouver and Toronto. So they think there's going to be a market correction. And so we've had to come up with more down payment than ever before. And you know what? All you do when you're doing that is you just work it into your plan, because whether it's a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, the real estate you're investing in is still good, solid investment. As I mentioned before, mortgage pay down is one of the biggest keys, and that's because your tenants are paying it down for you. And if you're holding on to a building 5, 10, 20 years, like we have no intention of selling the majority of our buildings. Sometimes we'll sell something to upgrade to something else, which is something that sorry, I just got a call there. I had to decline it. So you'll always be upgrading and stuff, but generally you're looking at long-term buy and holds. A mortgage pay down's huge for you. Your tenants paying off your building, putting long-term savings into your bank account. You're going to need money in 5 years, but you're also going to need money in 10 years, unless you're like 90 already, because people are living longer and longer. So you got to think about that too. Okay, so that was one thing that came up, was about the new mortgage rules. Logan comments and he says, can you comment a bit about what an executive summary is, and what does a good one sound and look like? Okay, actually that's a really good point. One of the things that we discussed on the hot seat on Wednesday night, because we also do hot seats with our mastermind members on a webinar as well. And so on Wednesday, we got to deal with some of our 2 youngest members in our group. I think they're like 19 and 20. They're so ambitious, and we just love that about them. And they were saying, we have people lined up that we want to talk to about investing with us, but we don't have a deal yet. So if you don't have a deal yet, and you want to see if you can raise some money, because some people, it's like the chicken and the egg. What comes first? Does a deal come first, or does the money come first? Because a lot of people are so scared about making an offer on a building just because they might not be able to raise the money. So this is my advice to you for that. So what you want to do is start sharing an example of an ideal deal, a deal that you would like to be in. It might be one that you've been approached with in our mastermind group. It might be one that you've figured out yourself. So say you go into MLS or you get a realtor to send you a deal, and you've done all the numbers on it and it looks really good, and you're not ready yet to make the offer on it. Well, you know what? Put together an executive summary, or it's also called a deal package, and go out and present it to the possible investors that you might be having. The reason for that is you can get commitments up front from people. You can say, this is an example of a deal that I'm working on, or that I'm hoping to be working on. I just kind of want to line up some commitments first. These are typically the types of deals that our group is looking for. Always use the power of your group, especially if you're brand new. So if people are saying to you, well, have you ever owned a building before? And you can say something like, well, you know what? I work with a group that has over $50 million in real estate. So although I don't have one personally, I've got a lot of experience behind me. So talk that way too, because that means a lot. And then what you'd put in an executive summary is, you're going to get a ton of details back from your realtor, all kinds of details. So you don't need to put every detail into your executive summary. What you want to put in is maybe a picture of the property. You want to put in a detailed description as well that says this is an 18-unit building. That's typical deals that we do. And it is great potential for value add through property management, increasing rents, decreasing vacancies, doing a few renovations, getting the rents up. And that's our job, of course. And what we're looking for is $500,000 or whatever your number is. You know it ahead of time because you've done the background analysis on it. We're looking for $600,000. Make sure you put an actual number. Don't go 5 or 6. and you know what? Work in there your acquisition fee. And so that you get paid a bit up front, because there's a lot of work involved to put an apartment deal together. And sometimes you'll work on it, 2-3 months when you're doing your due diligence and everything else. So so what else it looks like is you want to put how they're going to get their money back, because that is one of the biggest things that investors want to know. How do I get my money back? And then, because a lot of new people looking for capital, they get all excited about the numbers and they say, hey, you're going to get this huge rate of return on your money. When in reality, investors' first question is, how do I get my money back? So that's what you want to share with them. And in our deals, what we do is we pay the investor back before we get any share of the cash flow. So all the cash flow that comes from our buildings goes to the investing partners first. And then once they're fully paid out, in anywhere, like I said, 5 to 10 years, it depends on your deal. And also the people you're working with. The one thing that you can think of, if you've got a bunch of young investors, well, maybe put in a 20-year amortization and just know that in 20 years, that building's going to be paid off and cash flowing with no mortgage. And because a lot of people, everybody thinks they want cash flow right now. Not all investors do. Sometimes they don't want cash flow because they're making really good incomes now. And so a lot of it will depend on your demographic and who your investors are. So keep that in mind too. So what else you'll put in an executive summary is maybe what your rents are now and what they're going to be once it's an optimized building. And so that's a good part of an executive summary. Does that answer all your questions, Logan? Okay. Oh, and here's another question. So Rob, welcome, Rob. Do you expect property managers to actively work on filling vacancies? Do you build in a financial incentive? You know what? That's really a good question, Rob. Yes, we do. As soon as the tenant in the building gives their notice, the property manager starts actively looking for new tenants. And you know what? It is a good chore to do that, because they go to advertise. Sometimes they have to show the property, 5-6 times before they get a proper tenant, because you don't just take any tenant. And so, yes, we do give them an incentive to we call it a fill fee. And I've seen it anywhere from $75 to $300. So just depending on what your property manager does for you. Sometimes it's extra, but generally it's the same price across the board, because sometimes they luck out and get the first person that looks at the building, but there's still advertising costs. There's running over to the building and showing it, and maybe spending an extra little bit of time to get the entranceway cleaned up so that they can show it. If a tenant is living in there, because quite often we like to show the property while the tenant's still there, we'll even ask ask them, could you clean up a bit? Because we're going to show the property. And, if you have a good relationship with them, generally they'll do that kind of stuff for you. So yeah, very good questions. We do. Okay, here's a question. Right now I'm looking at an 8-plex and considering broaching the subject of seller financing with the seller. Any tips on how to do that or any other creative financing options? We tell all our students, ask for a vendor take back on everything. If nothing else, you're getting practice. And the more practice you get, the better you get at doing it. I know at first we were very scared of asking for a vendor take back because we hadn't done it. So even though we'd practiced in class, in classes we took, it still doesn't feel natural till you've done it yourself. And so we asked our realtor to ask. And the realtor goes, oh no, they won't do that, And after we'd already lost the deal, we went backward because we were still kind of thinking maybe we could spring it back to life. But they got another offer. But we asked them, would you have taken a vendor take back on that? And they said, oh yeah, you know what? We're real estate investors. We get that. We understand. Yeah, we probably would have considered it, depending on your terms and stuff. So good question. Yes, when you're broaching vendor take back, I always tell people, you know what, get to know the seller a little bit. If you get a chance to talk to them yourself as opposed to the realtor, ask them things like, do you have more buildings? Because you know what, it first might get you first on the list of looking at a next building. And if they, then depending on what their answer is, yeah, I've got 10 other buildings and all we're doing is we're selling this one because we're going to take the money out of it and buy a new one. Well, then there's probably not a really good chance of getting vendor take back. But if you hear something like, yeah, you know what, it's time for us to retire. We're going to sell everything we own and just start living off the money. We've been working at this for years and we're going to move to Mexico or whatever they say. And you might say something like, well, oh, that, you know what, that's really interesting. What do you do with the money when you get it? Like, just sit it in a bank account? And they might say, well, you know what, we haven't really decided all that. Bank accounts don't pay very much. We're scared of the mutual fund market because it's up and down all the time. That's a good end for you to talk about. Well, you know what? We'd definitely be interested in some seller financing if you're interested in staying in your own building for a bit. I mean, it. It's a good building, right? That's what you've been telling me. Would you consider do some vendor financing on it? And sometimes you have to explain what that means. Some investors will know. And other investors, maybe it's the only building they've ever had. They didn't get the option when they bought, so they don't understand it. So you might explain something like, yeah, we could pay you 6% interest on your money, and maybe it's even some principal and interest back. And then when we get the rents up and refinance it, we can pay your principal out in 3 to 5 years. And some might say, hey, well, I like that idea of that 6% interest, but can we do it over 10 years? So they might even opt something back to you that you didn't even consider. So yes, ask every vendor, even if you don't need it, ask, because it's nice to have it lined up. Who knows, you might be like one of my students, George. He did a seminar with some investors and needed to raise $450,000, and instead he raised $900,000. So he has had more money to then go on and already do his next deal. Okay, so, well, thank you, Mike. That's a nice comment. Great advice. You're so knowledgeable and composed. Well, good. You know what? We're having a good day here today. Sometimes we have challenges with technology and stuff. Go look at some of my previous ones. You can see my head's kind of to the side like this because we had the phone turned, didn't realize we had to have it up and down. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. Give me some hearts. Another question from Rob is regarding property management. What are the going rates and percentages for property management? Some people will give you a dollar value per property. And generally, because my oldest daughter actually does our property management, so we get a special deal from her. And the more properties you have with a property manager, the more, the better your rate will get. But if you're doing a single family home, you're looking at anywhere from 75 to 100 to even 150 a door. It depends, maybe traveling time and stuff like that you have to think about, because I do know a little bit about your situation. And so just ask. And I've heard anything ranging from 4% to 10%. But also, you want to know what that includes. Because if they're doing things like shoveling walks and lawn care and different stuff like that, if they're managing all your repairs and maintenance, maybe they're the ones that actually change the light bulbs when they're going in and doing your inspections. Well, you know what? All that's worth a little bit more, because if they just tell you you've got a light bulb out, you got to actually run over there, then what good's that? And you know what? That's important, and you might not think it is, but when you're showing your properties and you've got a tenant living in there, a lot of times the tenant doesn't realize that half their light bulbs are burnt out. Maybe they just don't notice, they just don't care, or they don't want to spend the money on light bulbs if they're moving out. Always have some in your vehicle when you're doing an inspection so you can just pop them in. I mean, they're cheap, and if your property is well lit, your prospective tenants are going to notice that. So that's just a quick little tip. Everybody owns buildings should have some light bulbs and some cleaner in their car, because you never know if you're doing a showing, a last minute showing or something. Well, you know what? It takes 3 seconds to wipe that mirror so there's not spots all over it, right? Okay, so yeah, good questions here, guys. I'm enjoying this. Here's another question. Is it too late to creatively finance a multifamily property once it's listed by a realtor? No, it's not too late. As a matter of fact, my suggestion there is, and when we're teaching our students to build their power team, we're always recommending get a realtor who understands vendor takebacks, and they're not going to be scared to ask them. If you have a realtor that says no to you, you need a new realtor. And if you need a referral, we have a great one in our mastermind group. She is not scared to ask for vendor takebacks. They've been doing it for years. And if your realtor won't, like I said, get one who can. So no, if it's listed by the realtor, and like I said, again, you should be dealing with a realtor who understands that. If perchance you're not, and you feel it necessary to deal with this realtor, you tell them, this is how it's going to be. I'm going to make 3 offers on this building. One's going to include a vendor take back, which I can maybe pay a little bit more because I don't have to raise so much money. One is going to include maybe a lowball offer with no vendor financing at all, and maybe a middle of the road one with a little bit of vendor financing instead of all you want. So you just tell your realtor, and you can always do a cover letter to go with that offer, because there's not always a ton of space to write that creative stuff. Do a letter on there saying, dear seller, this is what we'd like to do. And ask them. Sometimes your realtor doesn't like for you to meet the seller, but ask them. Sometimes they'll include you in on it too, because sometimes you're going to know more than your realtor. So really good question. Okay, another question here. Suggestions, what to consider when making an offer on a property when you do not have a real estate agent, but the vendor has one. You know what, when that's the case, what the realtor that the vendor has is sometimes they'll be your realtor for both. Now, they do have to do a disclosure statement saying that they're working for you and working for the other one, because of course there's a conflict there. They've got to negotiate for their vendor, and they've got to negotiate for you. So it's always best if you have your own realtor. But the one benefit of having a pocket listing like that, where the seller or the realtor is maybe set to make commissions on both sides, both as the sale and as the buy, is maybe you'll get a percentage off, and maybe he can reduce his fees in order to give you a better deal. And I'm going to talk to you about one of my examples actually very early on in our career, because this was a learning curve for us. And I talked about it at the mastermind this weekend, and it's so funny what people think even years later. But we had found an 18-unit apartment building in the paper. We had bought one already, and my husband called the realtor, and we went out and met with them. It was in Weyburn, which was just outside of Regina. And we met with a realtor there. And, we can't remember if he asked us if we had a realtor. It just wasn't on our radar. We just thought, you know what, this guy can show us the building and see how we can make out. So he took us for lunch or dinner or something and gave us all the details of the property. And you know what, we negotiated. And I believe we negotiated him to $75,000 a door, which was exactly what we just paid for the other one that we'd bought a few months before. So we figured it was decent, a little bit smaller town. So even though it was almost a year later, we still thought that was a decent price. And he had said, yeah, he thought he could make that work. Well, we went back to our realtor who helped us buy the first one, and we thought, we're probably not that good at negotiating yet. We should maybe bring in a realtor and he can negotiate for us and get us a better deal. That's what we're thinking, right? And he'll do all the paperwork and make sure we cross all our T's and dot all our I's. Well, you know what? That the initial realtor was, first of all, upset with us. Because, and like I said, we can't remember if we told him we had a realtor or not. But he would have, it was one way or the another, he didn't think we had a realtor. So he was going to double deal this, right? So he could give us a reduction. Well, when we brought in our realtor, we ended up paying more for that building. Can you believe that? We ended up paying $76,333 a door when we'd initially negotiated 75. So you might wonder why that would happen. Well, because the original realtor could have gave us a break on fees, because they usually negotiate their fees up front with the seller, we could have got that break. But we brought in the realtor thinking, we're too new. And you know what? We ended up paying more. And you know what? There was an excuse in there for paying more. I can't remember what it was. It wasn't this one. And so when I was telling the story, one of my mastermind students says, "Hey, was that realtor so and so?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "I know. And he still talks about you, He said, "Who are you working with?" And he says, "I'm working with Edna Keep." And he goes, "Oh, I remember her." So that kind of stuff, that was, oh my gosh, that was 7 years ago. And that's what he thinks of me. You don't want your realtors thinking that way. But you know what? We were new. We really didn't know. We didn't do it on purpose. We didn't do it because we were going behind anybody's back. We just really thought that the other realtor could negotiate us a better deal. So he still thinks that way about me. Next time I see him, I'm gonna ask him if he can get over that because we've learned so much in the last 7 years. So that's how I would deal with it, Rob. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, let me see some more questions I got up here. Thanks very much, Chandel, for putting these questions up where I can read them. Okay, another question. I'm new to real estate investing. I'm concerned about getting more loans after I close on my first. What will the banks look at when I apply for more money? And will that be an issue for future investing? And I'm not sure if you can answer me back that, but there's a difference there. If you're looking at buying a single family home or duplex or anything under 5 units, really, you're looking at residential financing. So yes, you're going to be limited, probably to 4, unless you've got a really, really, really creative mortgage broker or somebody that really understands real estate. But most people, the maximum properties they can get is 4. And because they're looking at your income to be able to offset the rent in case you can't. So know that going in. And you know what? It's a little bit different with apartment buildings, because with apartment buildings, they're looking at the building. The building has to pay for itself. That's very, very important. And so they're not looking so much at you. Do you still have to guarantee and personal guarantee? Yes. Do you have to have some net worth and experience backing you? Yes, which is another great reason to joint venture with more experienced people when you're first starting out. But yes, we were able, because we were early on, we were able to actually get 2 properties with 5% down. And we've got, I think, like, I don't know, maybe 12, 15 mortgages in between our name, our personal names, and our corporations in houses. But nowadays it's getting tougher and tougher. So yeah, just know that. So very, very good question. And if you're dealing with a knowledgeable mortgage broker, because again, I tell you, deal with a mortgage broker who understands real estate investing, because they will go to the harder lenders first and then go to the easier lenders after. So let them know if you're thinking that someday you might want to buy 10 properties. So do it, it's a different story when you're just buying 1 or 2. But if someday you might want to own 10, let them know that up front, because it's a whole different plan. Okay, well, I just want to say, first of all, great feedback, great questions, everyone. I really appreciate all this. I'm going to shoot at doing these every single Friday, so bring some questions for me, and I'd love to be able to help coach you through anything that you're working on. I do have a webinar that's starting at 11, so I won't be able to be on here much longer. But if you have more questions, tap them in. I think I got another one here. Okay, I'm a new landlord, and the time has come to renew my first lease. So I've come here to learn and gather any suggestions or comments or best practices on how to do this. Okay, so people, if I have any property managers online, I'd love to hear an answer from you here. But a few questions I have are how I go about getting the lease paperwork. There's lease paperwork on the Rentalsman site you can get. We have fine-tuned our lease over the years and added in stuff that we found out being a challenge. Generally, anytime we ended up with a challenge on a lease, we added in another point. But yeah, you can get leases right from the Rentalsman site in your province, so that'll work good. Should I consult an attorney to create a new lease or make changes? I wouldn't. Very expensive. I would just go to the Rentalsman and start there, because they've got really good leases. Something I learned recently, though, that I found very interesting is sometimes leases actually protect the tenant more than it protects the landlord. So we know some investors that they just do month-to-month leases, because if they've got a crappy tenant and they have to get them out right away and they've got a lease, that lease protects those tenants more than it protects you. So if they're, say, moving in, and sometimes this happens, they move in, they're professional tenants, they find 150 reasons not to pay, my check is late, I sent it in the mail, it's gone missing, all this kind of stuff. It was a money order, and my money's gone without the money order. There's 150 excuses. So a non-lease or month-to-month lease means you can give them notice and say, I'm selling this place. And so you're out. And you know what? If there's no long-term lease, that protects you. So that was a good point. We learned that just a couple weekends ago at one of our Profit in the Prairies events, where we had some sophisticated investors come in from Saskatoon, and they were sharing that concept with us. So that was a good learning curve for us too. And you're right, the lease and paperwork is very important because it does prevent future complications. One of the things that we put in our leases is that we're going to do quarterly inspections on this property, so be prepared. We know we have to give 24 hours notice, but that's a good way to avoid a grow up happening in your property. And another thing to do is to get people to clean up, because tenants don't always notice that leaky tap. They don't notice the toilet's leaking. They don't notice there's ice jam and there's water coming in on the roof. You know, they don't always notice that. You can save yourself a lot of money by doing frequent inspections. Rob says, thanks for the advice. Do you recommend people setting up a company or corporation for each apartment building? Another really good question. You know what, Rob? When we started buying, we set up a corporation right at the beginning because we'd taken some classes from the US, and they're very litigious society there. Everybody sues everybody. So they said, make sure everything you own's in a corporation. They even wanted us to have our own personal home in a corporation. Well, we haven't went that far, but I know a lot of people that have. And so we've got some houses in our personal name. We've got most of our houses in our company. But for our apartment buildings, we set up a new corporation for every single apartment building. And the reason why is you have different investors probably for most apartment buildings. And even if you don't, because we've had times where we've refinanced an apartment building, got everybody their money back, so they've bought into new buildings with us. So they're the same investors, but we didn't lump them in with that one because if you ever have a challenge with the building and you're getting sued, you don't want to have all of them tied up at one time. So yes, every single apartment building, a new corporation. And you know what? Most of the time, ours are just numbered corporations. So it can be done quickly. You don't have to do name searches and all that kind of stuff. So we have different 101 something something Saskatchewan Limited. That's the name of our corporation. So very, very good question. Okay, let's see what else I got here. Oh, you know what? This is the same question that I just answered. So you might have to go back and listen to it, but I will comment a little bit on it and more again because a lot of new investors think I have to have an apartment building before I can search for the money. No, you can start searching for the money now based on something that you know you'd like to buy. So learn your numbers, do an analysis, do up a fake deal, and go out and talk to investors. Because you know what? One of the keys to getting investors is talk to lots. The more people you talk to, the more chances you have of raising the money. You talk to one person and he shuts you down and you go home and put your head under the mat. Guess what? You're not going to get any investors. Don't get attached to yes. Just get attached to how many people can I show this deal to. Start making those appointments, share your deal, and you'll be surprised how quickly you can raise money. And at the end of every presentation, ask for a referral. Actually, even when you're phoning to make an appointment and someone turns you down, say, well, would you know anyone who might be interested in investing in an apartment building? Because, you know, they might have a brother or sister that has money when they're telling you, I don't have any money. And another thing too is don't let them say, I don't have any money, and just let it go at that. I've got a really good sheet called Find the Money Spreadsheet. And you know what? You can use some of that when you're talking to people. You can say, well, you know what, have you owned your own home for 5 years or more? You probably have equity in your home you could access to invest because most people don't think that that's an opportunity. If they've got a term deposit, money in their savings account, a TFSA, or cash sitting in a mutual fund account, they can access that. And cash surrender value in a life insurance policy. You know, there's many, many different ways to find the money. And if you check out my Find the Money worksheet, you'll be able to find more too. And so I hope that answers all the questions. I'm going to sign off now. That's all for today. Chandel says she's going to post the Find the Money worksheet in this feed if you want to go through it. And I think that's it. So thank you very much. We'll see you next Friday. Same day, everyone. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.